Hello and thanks for joining me again for some landscape photography chat. And it's time for a very long overdue Q&A. I've already apologized on previous videos weeks ago to people saying I'd get round to this. Well, at last I finally have, and again, apologies for taking so long over it. Now, I'm going to start with the clickbaity title of this video, the Atlas Athlete Backpack, so that if you've tuned in for that, looking for a review, you'll get that bit out of it, and then you can scuttle off while I carry on talking to the people who follow my channel and might be interested in the subsequent questions that I'm going to get on to. So the Atlas Athlete Backpack, well, actually I'm not going to review it, and I'm not going to talk in any great length about the features that it has, because there are plenty of videos out there that do just that. They're really good, really comprehensive. I'm going to link to one in particular by a friend of mine called Tammy Mellett from the US, where she went into huge detail about the colossal amounts of stuff it can carry. So worth having a look at that afterwards if you haven't already looked at it, if you're interested in this particular backpack. What I want to do though is to cover, because people have asked me since I got it about 6 months ago, what was behind my decision to get that particular backpack, in particular because it is eye-wateringly expensive. It's made in the US. I think it's Phoenix, Arizona, if I recall correctly. I might be wrong, but somewhere in that neck of the woods anyway. And it's not available to buy retail in the UK or the EU. You actually have to have it shipped across from the manufacturer. And it's about 300 quid, but you'll also pay the thick end of 100 quid import duty as well. So this is a backpack that's costing probably getting on for double the cost of any comparable backpack. So that begs the question then, what the hell were you thinking? So what was behind my decision? Well, let me explain first of all some features of the backpack that I really like, and I think you'll start to see where this is going. Now this backpack, when it's empty, weighs almost nothing. It's really, really lightweight. Don't let that fool you though, it's still extremely rugged. The people that built this were photographers that spend a lot of time in the wilderness. They really knew what they were doing with this backpack. They're not specifically a camera manufacturer or a camera accessory manufacturer. It was an enthusiast like myself who wanted to be able to carry wild camping equipment and their camera equipment safely. Now, I'm going to say that if you're using full frame, you're going to struggle with this, although I do have a friend who spends a lot of time in the Lake District who shoots full frame and gets on perfectly well with this backpack, so it can be done. Now, the reasons that I went for this particular bag, well, there are 4 reasons I think about any particular bag. Obviously, there's the comfort of the bag, there's will it protect my camera gear, can I get at it easily, and how much can it carry? So those are the 4 things. Now, as we all know, we always end up compromising. We always end up thinking, well, I can put up with it not having quite enough space for extra stuff, or I can put up with it being a little bit awkward to get into because it's got loads of space for extra stuff. There's always those compromises. I've got some good friends that use a particular camera bag manufacturer that's very well known, very popular. It's a good quality bag, but they're forever moaning about how uncomfortable it is when it's fully loaded because it's not remotely balanced. All of the weight runs through the shoulder straps, and I've seen people almost in tears coming off a long hike with a full frame kit in their backpack, a bottle of water, some other bits and pieces, and before you know it, they're almost crippled. To wear a backpack properly, you have to put the weight through your hips, through a waist belt. The shoulder straps are then simply there to stop it flapping around. There should be absolutely no weight on the shoulder straps. And when I'm wearing this, as I'll show you, I can slide my fingers underneath there, no trouble at all, even when it's fully laden. So with those 4 key things in mind, why did I feel that this was worth an eye-watering amount of money? Well, it may not be to you, but to me it was worth every penny, and the reason is this. Every requirement I had of a bag in the past was met by using multiple bags. I had a bag that was great for wild camping, but it was absolutely colossal, really comfortable, mind you, an Osprey, but getting in and out of your camera equipment was a headache. Then I had a smaller bag which meant that it was perfect for an hour on the beach. But then if I needed to go for any longer than that and even needed a bag of sandwiches and a flask of coffee, I'd need a bigger bag. So I was forever shunting my stuff in between bags, and inevitably you end up out on location and the thing that you need, you've forgotten to move it and it's in another bag. That happened to me a lot. And I just felt that there had to be a solution that fits every bill. And I wasn't really particularly looking, it was just the standard stuff. YouTube offers you a video and you think, oh, that might be interesting, I've got nothing better to do, so you watch it and you think, oh, actually, that could work for me. This is it closed right down to around about 20 litres. You can get a laptop in it and you can use this. I take it to London on the train, laptop, sandwiches, flask of coffee, no problem at all. One bag. I do want to carry my camera equipment with me, so that just lives in it. It doesn't weigh very much, absolutely perfect. But then when I want to go out for a day hike, everything's already in here. All I do is just add in a few layers, the extra bits and bobs I need for a day hike. But the key thing is, if I want to go overnight, this will expand right out to 40 litres, and I can carry my tent and my sleeping system and my cooking equipment and all that stuff that I need, and the photographic equipment and the video equipment all in one bag. And when I'm out camping with it, what it also does really well is that there's plenty of external pockets and attachment points, so anything that doesn't quite fit in, I can hang it off the outside, no problem at all. Plus, the waist belt comes on and off really easy, and you can specify that specifically to a size that you want, so that's really handy. I don't need that when it's in urban mode, but of course I wouldn't dream of going out on a hike without it, so that's perfect. What this also has, as I'll show you shortly, is some really interesting features. So that's it in urban mode. As you can see, it's quite a low profile, no problem at all, and as I mentioned, very, very lightweight. Well, now you've seen how this looks when I was wearing it indoors in urban mode. This is me out and about with it on a day hike at the moment, but there's still loads of room to put wild camping gear if I was going to stay overnight. One of the things that I really like about it is the extent to which there are clips and attachments and all sorts of things. I've had bags in the past that didn't even have D-rings on the shoulder strap, so you couldn't attach anything. The way I tend to operate, this is my vlogging tripod. You're on my main tripod at the moment while I show you how I set myself up. But this has these side pockets that roll out. In this side I keep my coffee, and I also use a big carabiner to keep my trekking poles handy, so I don't have to take my bag off if I want to start using them. Or more to the point, I can just stow them away if I don't want to use them as I'm heading off. That slots in there. The camera's usually on the top of it. This little strap goes around it. And what that means is that I'm completely hands-free, but everything is to hand. My camera sits on my Peak Design clip as a rule. The reason I've started using this little pouch, Peak Design 3-litre sling, keeps my filters and my spare batteries and bits and pieces nice and handy. And that means that because this bag is so comfortable, I often just leave it on my back all day long. So while I'm walking, if I see a shot and I just want to quickly set up a tripod or talk to you or grab my camera or whatever I might want to do with regards to photography or making videos, I can do that. So it's really handy. The way that all of these straps and things sit are still extremely comfortable. I mentioned previously, I think, about having room under shoulder straps. There's absolutely no pressure on there at all. I can easily get my fingers underneath it. All of the weight is on the hip belt, which of course I've now attached, and it goes on and off really quickly and easily, so it's no problem at all. And so there we are. I've given this bag some serious workouts over the last 6 months, and I've been really pleased with it. And so, well, I was unsure about spending that much money at the outset, but right now, if anybody asked me if they had the same sort of kit that I do and the same use case that I have, I would say absolutely go for it. Don't worry about the cost, because you won't be buying another bag for years to come. Now, If you only tuned in for the clickbaity bag review bit, that's that all done. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. I'm now going to crack on with some other questions from people who've very kindly followed me for some time. Okay, now just another couple of questions to answer before we head off home. I've been asked about my brolly, which has come into some good use lately with the weather we've had. It is a lightweight trekking umbrella. It's by Six Moons Design. It weighs 6 ounces, absolutely nothing at all. And the way I stow it on my pack means I can grab it when I'm out and about. And of course, as you'll know, when you're trekking, if it comes on to rain, if you're out in showery weather, it's a real pain having to stop, take your backpack off, get your waterproofs out, get yourself all set up. And sometimes you can get some really sharp showers in these mountains. So this is very, very handy indeed. And you quickly grab it, stick it here, and guess what? Your entire backpack is under the brolly. And even though I might well have waterproofs on, this is going to make all the difference. Now, for hands-free walking, very easy. I've got a carabiner up here that I slip it through. I'm not going to do it now because it does take a minute or two to set up. And then I've just got a bit of bungee here with a slide clip, which just pulls it up against there. And it means I can walk about with trekking poles. And as you saw on my Watkin Path one, it does the job really well. Now, the next question is, how do I get on with the Peak Design clips and how do I feel about the cost? And the cost is one that comes up a lot. They are expensive. They're about 70 quid if you include the one that has the clip and the plate that goes on the camera, but you can buy the elements separately. So what I did was I bought another plate to go on this little sling, which is really handy. What that means is I've got somewhere to put the camera when I'm taking the backpack on and off, but also sometimes I'm just out with a sling. For example, I go dog walking and my camera comes with me. I'm a photographer. It's unusual that I'm out and about walking anywhere and I haven't got my camera with me. So that comes in really handy because it won't fit in the sling. And anyway, the sling's got dog treats in it. So the cost, well, I've got to be honest with you, it was expensive, but it's reliable. This camera has been on here when I've been scrambling on rocks on Moel Shabod, and it didn't budge, and it was in a place that I wasn't likely to knock it against the rock. So really, really handy. But when I wanted to turn around and go, wow, look at that view, I had my camera, I could get a shot. So yeah, I mean, you know, it's just a case for me of I've got a really good use case and I wouldn't be without it now. If you feel it's too expensive, well, I would quite understand if you generally carry your camera around in a backpack and just get it out and put it on a tripod every now and then. Totally understandable. Now, the final question is one which you might consider to be common sense, but I'm going to answer it anyway because there are people who might find it helpful. There are times when you might want to change a lens in rough conditions. I don't, because I deliberately bought this lens so it lives on the camera 90% of the time. But every now and then I do want to shoot longer or I do want to shoot wider, and I have got other lenses. So if conditions are bad, and whether or not they're bad, I tend to do it as habit, is I always face the camera downwards. You can reach the release button, face the camera downwards, it comes off really easy. So if it's inclement conditions, you're not waving your camera about with your sensor visible to the elements. And also shelter it with your body, sort of hunch over it. Final tip is have the other lens ready with the back cap off so that you can very quickly pop this in and pop the other one on so that the sensor is only exposed for 5 seconds. If you're sheltering it 5 seconds, you won't have any problem at all. I've changed this on the top of a mountain in a blizzard. No bother whatsoever. So that's it. So I think that's it for here. I might be answering some more back in the studio, who knows, but thank you very much. Right, and I'll just finish up with a couple of questions around processing, but before that, one quick one about the camera. I was asked about what were my thoughts on the high resolution mode. You may have seen me use it in 1 or 2 videos here and there, some very specific use cases. Very quickly, what it is that the camera can be set to take a sequence of images, 8 images, and in between each image it moves the sensor half a pixel, and then it stitches those 8 images together and outputs it to a raw file, which is about 80 megabytes. So pretty colossal, lots of detail, really, really useful. Of course, not much use if your subject is moving, because it sort of emulates a longish exposure. It expands the exposure time times 8. However, there are occasions when I found it really useful. One in particular is in the mountains, and it was prior to me getting a particularly long lens. If I knew I was going to be cropping in quite tight, then that was a really useful get out of jail card, because mountains don't move much. So if I was shooting a splash of light on a far peak, I would use the high resolution mode knowing I was going to crop in. Has to be on a tripod. I've tried doing it handheld, just doesn't work, despite the stabilization, because of course the stabilization isn't being used, because that's what's moving the sensor between the shots. So that's one particular use case. I must say, generally speaking, I don't use it because I find that the 20 megapixels of the standard resolution is pretty good in most cases. So even though there are instances where I could use it, I generally don't. But that was one where I most certainly would. Other instances are where I do want to emulate a longish exposure. So say I'm shooting waves moving on a shore. I want a shutter speed of about a second, and it's quite bright. So I've got a choice of putting on a really heavy filter or simply doing it high res and let the camera movement itself extend the shutter speed. So I've done that a couple of times. So don't use it a lot. It's kind of nice to have, but it wouldn't be a feature that would mean, oh yeah, I really must buy this camera because of that feature. So that's that. Last two questions are processing related. First one is, I was asked about the Topaz plugins for Photoshop and Lightroom. Topaz charge you a one-off fee. They're about 70 quid per plugin. They've got things like denoise, sharpen, and various others. They've got an AI plugin that allows you to expand images, and it interpolates the pixels using an AI. Tried it, couldn't see a use case for it, didn't bother, but I bought the stabilization plugin, and I'll tell you for why, because it is a real get out of jail plugin. If you've got a marginally soft image, it's very, very clever. The AI in that is quite astonishing. I'm not going to share which images I've used it on, but I use it quite routinely just to give it that crisp sharpness that I really like. And in fact, I haven't done any Lightroom or Photoshop sharpening probably in about 6 months or so. I've done it all using the Topaz plugin. Now it is 70 quid, and some people would say, well, that's an awful lot of money. I do find it strange that people are so worried about spending 70 quid here, 50 quid there, when they'll quite happily drop £2,000 on a lens. Because you'd have to buy a lot of plugins before you spent the sort of money you'd spend on a lens. And I know people have got a bag full of glass and they've got a favourite lens they're using most of the time, and there'll be another 3 or 4 grand's worth of glass that hardly ever gets used. So for me, for a plugin that I use on almost every image, it's quite good value, and I really, really like the effect of it. Difficult to describe it. Go and have a play with it for yourself. I think there's a trial version you can download that works for a couple of weeks. I might be wrong, but anyway, so that's the Topaz plugins. And as I say, the one that I particularly like is the stabilization plugin. So the last question that I'm going to come to is, I was asked by a gentleman, why, when Lightroom allows you to adjust your exposure 5 stops either way, is it important to get it right in camera? Well, there's actually, the short answer is, you can be quite flexible with what you do in camera in this day and age. You know, back in the day when exposure was a real art and you didn't know what you had until you developed your film, then it was much more important to get it right in camera. But in this day and age, there is a certain amount of flexibility. However, you simply can't completely disregard it. on one side, if you were to underexpose by 3, 4, 5 stops, something like that, you will 100% definitely be introducing an awful lot of noise when you pull those shadows back up using the slider. There's no getting away from that. And the only way then to get rid of that noise is to use a denoise filter of some sort, and that will always soften the image. Even if it does manage to get rid of the noise, a lot of them won't. But if you've pulled up shadows that are 4 or 5 stops too dark when you took the shot, it'll be a horrible mess and you won't be able to do anything with it. On the other side of the coin, I actually generally shoot 2 or even 3 stops over, knowing I'm going to darken it down in post. I've explained that before, so I'm not going to go into it again. However, you still have to be careful, because it's really easy to clip your highlights if you don't pay attention. And it's really odd, because many of you will be thinking, oh yeah, but I've got a histogram. You know, it's really easy to not over or underexpose in this day and age. And to a lot of people, that is absolutely right. It's a fair comment. However, I've worked with a lot of people, and you'll be amazed how sometimes they don't have the histogram on the camera. They don't check it. They're not really looking. They're kind of winging it, and they don't know in particular if they've clipped highlights. And of course, if you've clipped highlights, that's horrific. Your eye is drawn to the brightest part of the image. If highlights are clipped, you're not going to be able to ignore it in the image. If you clip the shadows, and let's be fair, when people are darkening an image and they're working in post, very often they'll have a few shadows that are absolute black, because they want them, because it creates the contrast. But your eyes pull to the brightest point, and if you find that you're looking at that, you just can't draw your eye away from it on an image, and it's clipped, it's horrible. And you know, it's been said in the past by a friend of mine, there's no excuse for clipping your highlights. So I'm going to leave you with those thoughts. Thank you ever so much for your questions. Not my usual sort of stuff. I'm in danger of becoming one of those landscape photographers who spends more time in the studio. Who do we know that does that? Anyway, thank you ever so much for watching. We'll be up a hill next time, probably. Really appreciate you coming along with me. Oh, and if you haven't done it yet, why not subscribe now and join me next time? Cheers.